I've got to get up one moment, please.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. We have quite a full house today. We have my amazing co-host, Daniel Betro. We also have some amazing guests. We have Vinny Eastwood, coming from the One Great Network. We have Jeff Nistovsky and Aaron Joyce. Deskovic. And we have Aaron Joyce. We're going to learn about these fine gentlemen and what they do. We're also going to plug where you can find all of their work and all of their endeavors. So without further ado, just before we start, if you want to keep the Ron Paul revolution going, if you want to keep the ideas of Murray Rothbard alive, take a look at the LP Mises Caucus. Our message is simple. No more wars, no more lockdowns, no more bailouts, no more mandates. You're an individual. You can make the best decisions for yourself. You can click here if you want to become a delegate, and you can also find our resources here. So before we get started today, a lot of people, we have a lot of people on the show, and I'm very grateful to hear that. And I was going to get into some articles, but guys, I would love to hear actually your backgrounds and a little bit more about what's been going on with you, because I know there's been a lot of development in the world. So, Vinny, if you want to... and Jeff and Aaron.
And I was just going to
go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say I'm live as well. I just want to do a real quick introduction because I've interviewed everyone here, obviously, except for Aaron and Vinny. I don't know. Was Vinny on that stream we did with multiple people, or was he not on that one?
I don't think he was on that one.
Okay. All right. So I haven't done one with Vinny. But welcome to the Quantum Effect podcast. I'm excited to do this episode because I love talking with more than two people, especially people who are able to have conversations without interrupting and who aren't too emotional and whatnot. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. I think we're all disciplined in the way we converse, and just the diversity of not only personalities, but backgrounds here is amazing. I've had Jeffery on. I've gotten some really good reviews on the podcast me and him did, and it was very short-lived. So I've been wanting to get him back on, and today seemed like the perfect day for all these forces to kind of come together. But enough of me. Anyways, if you guys want to just introduce yourself, Vinny and Jeffery, whichever one you want to go in order, I don't care. Go for it.
You go first, Jeffery.
Sure. My name is Jeff Deskovic, and I'm an attorney who is the founder of the Jeffery Deskovic Foundation for Justice. We free wrongfully convicted people and pursue policy changes aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. We've gotten 13 people home. We helped pass 3 laws aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. We fight for broader criminal justice reform. Part of a national coalition group called It Could Happen to You, which I'm an advisory board member of, and which the foundation is part of. I'm going to sit on the Global Advisory Council for Restorative Justice International. I'm a quasi-public figure, so I do a lot of public speaking around the country, some internationally. I do a lot of print, radio, and television, as well as new media interviews, and I have a lot of articles in print. And I do all the advocacy work that I mentioned because I spent 16 years in prison myself. Was arrested at 16 for a murder and rape, which I did not commit. I lost the trial shortly after I turned 17. I was wrongfully incarcerated from age 17 to 32 prior to DNA testing proving my innocence and identifying the actual perpetrator. So all the charges against me were dismissed on actual innocence grounds. And so I bring that experience. I bring my master's degree in criminal justice with my thesis on wrongful conviction, cause and reform. And so all of that, along with my informal learning, forms the basis of my opinions. I often look at things 4 or 5 different ways and outside the box. Happy to join everybody tonight, and looking forward to an interesting discussion with a wide range of views on topics.
And I'm
Jeffery,
Vinny Eastwood. Oh, sorry. Can I?
No, I was just.
Is it my turn or?
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to show, I found your website. So if you guys want to take a look, go look at the Deskovic Foundation. That is all one word.org. And I believe this is your website, Jeffery, and you can
read
here. And
yes, it absolutely is.
And donate.
Mm-hmm.
And I have Vinny's up now. So, Vinny.
All right. Well, I'm
Sorry, I'm
Vinny
trying to
Eastwood.
coordinate everything.
Yeah, it can be a bitch to produce and host at the same time, and I know all about this. I have 13 years experience being a talk radio host, documentary filmmaker, and on the street activist here in New Zealand, and I am the only New Zealander to ever have an American-based talk radio show on American Freedom Radio that started in 2010, and I have more reach into the international patriot movement, alternative media, than any other living New Zealander. I've interviewed 2,000 individuals plus from hundreds of different disciplines and belief structures about all sorts of different things that they've been to. Generally, these are people that no one has ever heard of, and nobody wants to listen to once they do hear about them, because the things they say are far too scary or far too challenging to one's belief structure to even entertain the thought. After doing all of that, I had 65,000 subscribers across various YouTube channels and 6,000 episodes as well. And one day they were all gone, along with my Patreon, along with my Twitter. And now nobody knows where to find me, even though the VinnyEastwoodShow.com and that kind of thing is all there. I recently got arrested for protesting the lockdowns, for expressing an unpopular opinion in a public place while peacefully assembled, and was also charged with remaining silent in custody. I didn't know at the time when I was protesting lockdowns and trying to stand up for everybody's rights against tyrannical government that these basic fundamental rights in my country no longer exist.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think they're trying to do that throughout the world. I think they're going to fail. And it's because we can get amazing gentlemen such as yourself together. And also, guys, check out Vinny Eastwood at the One Great Network, run by or created by Mark Passio. He got the best truthers, I would say, together in one place. All you got to do is click on creators, go all the way down to the end, I believe, here. Find Vinny Eastwood. Go ahead and click on here. You can donate to him. You can also check out his website at thevinnyeastwoodshow.com. The world's so mad, you have to laugh about it or you'll go nuts. And I think I am going nuts a little bit.
If I can also, I believe it encapsulates my show to just give you my standard show intro. Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, slaves of the global plantation. Vinny Eastwood is bad news. It's like the news, but worse. It's the lighter side of genocide. Just because we're being exterminated doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. Otherwise, what's the point of being killed? Bad news. We're the only thing worse than living in a high-tech global police state run by child trafficking Satanists. It's Vinny's jokes.
I love it. I love it. So, Aaron, I would love to hear about what you're doing. I was digging your profile picture. You look pretty adamant about fighting for liberty.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very gracious for the invite this evening. I was chatting with Danny there earlier on, and certainly in Ireland, I listened to Vinny. I'm delighted. I wasn't expecting to meet Vinny. I had a little bit of a look at Jeffery Deskovich's background, of course, and I couldn't believe it. I can't wait to maybe later on connect with Jeffery a bit and listen a little bit more about what he's doing there. It's incredible work. But anyway, myself, I suppose just like today, it's an accident I'm here with you. It's an accident I'm doing what I'm doing in Ireland. I definitely was not one who grew up in my teenage years or in my young 20s to say I was an activist or that I was overly intrigued or interested in politics. Not at all. More so philosophy or football, to be quite honest, would have held my interest growing up. But I moved to Scotland maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, and I came home shortly before COVID, I suppose, hit us all. And I saw the state of my country, my economy, where I grew up. I didn't recognize the place that I grew up in anymore in a number of ways. Our mental health, I suppose our health system on a whole is in chaos, has been for a number of years, long before COVID came. I was definitely worried about the homeless situation and the suicide numbers that are taking effect in my country at the moment. And this again, guys, I'd emphasize was before COVID. So this kind of got me active to see what is going on in charity bases, what's going on in communal organizations at a local level to affect these issues. So I got interested in this, and COVID came, and then all of a sudden I started to see, I suppose, there's no better way of saying it, my people's rights eroded, civil and human rights, civil liberties I'm speaking of, human rights, being eroded by governments all over Western Europe and indeed in the Americas and in Asia. And I started to see that this is happening all over the world. This cannot be a coincidence. I established my interest in joining a political party in Ireland. And I suppose shortly after establishing my interest with that party, I think they thought I was too vocal, or they didn't like my stance on a couple of things. So I didn't pursue that line with that particular political party at the time. I suppose I'll word it like that. People in Ireland will know who I'm speaking of. And I ended up joining the Irish Freedom Party. And I've been a member of the Irish Freedom Party for the last year or so, or possibly just a little bit longer. And we're endeavoring to embark on, I suppose, highlighting what is going on in our country around the freedom of speech. We are Eurosceptic. We are highlighting to people that there is a massive energy crisis in our country. We are aware that there are some deals being made with Europe that we do not believe are in our country's interest. If some of you take a look this evening at peat, Irish peat, which I'm sure you might be aware of, comes from western coasts of Ireland, i.e. Galway, Mayo, Kerry, peat, it's burnt. And we now import this from Denmark. Could you make sense of this? You know, we import something from Denmark on a boat, and they've now stopped our factories producing this. There's some dodgy deals that I believe go on in and around the European Union, and I have skepticism, I suppose, around our involvement in Europe. And I could talk to you for the night about this, but the Irish Freedom Party, unfortunately, are pushed to the right side of politics in Ireland. I say pushed to the right side of politics because I think everybody that is standing against, I suppose, the narrative that is being presented, i.e. the COVID narratives, if you go against the mainstream media, you're nearly pushed to the right side of politics, or you're labeled a fascist. And this is becoming a problem, certainly in Ireland. I would highlight to yourselves and, of course, to our listeners. I'm sure it's happening all over the world, that anybody that stands against the elite, that stands against the COVID narrative or goes against government are more or less labeled as right-winged or indeed fascist. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I definitely want to delve into that topic with yourselves and, of course, all the guests this evening, because this seems to be something happening all over Ireland and indeed the UK. I don't want to babble on too much, guys. I'm actually really looking forward to the conversation this evening. And if you have any questions, I would love to highlight it. And thank you, Kareem, for sharing the actual party website at the minute. I see you sharing it. That indeed is our president, Herman Kelly. And Herman is at the moment very actively involved in Brussels. He is not an elected MEP, but he is in an advisory role to a number of positions in Europe. And indeed, at the moment, he is working with a number of politicians who are challenging the European Parliament on the stance regarding the COVID vaccine. So that's a very interesting one, maybe, that your viewers and yourselves can maybe look up after the show. There is indeed politicians in Europe starting to stand up against, I suppose, the elite that are trying to stop them from taking their seats within the European Parliament just because of the vaccine.
I mean, isn't it ironic that you see things sprouting out of Brussels?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Okay. Actually,
yeah. Well,
I was going to talk about Rittenhouse first, but all right, gentlemen, let's get into this. And we'll say, actually, Vinny Eastwood's a very special guest because him and Luke Radowski, the format, like I knew I wanted to do a show about libertarianism, but the way him and Luke Radowski
and just to clarify, Kareem means special like retarded. Go ahead, Kareem.
Yeah, the bus is slightly shorter, but you're not. But hey, we're not as dumb as Bill Gates is to, hang out with a high-level trafficker and then get caught on the mainstream media. So that being said,
we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes.
Yeah, some more than
others.
That's
the thing, though, is is that I don't feel that that was a dumb or thing or an accident at all. I mean, when you do one thing that's bad, okay, you can say that, there might not have been malice, there might have been incidental coincidence, and people make mistakes all the time. People make numerous mistakes all the time. But to do something consistently over a span of a decade, and to do that and hang out with Epstein after he was convicted, after it was all released,
can I speak to that issue,
shows you
Daniel?
that
Because
it was intentional. That it was intentional. Go ahead.
You're right, and you're coming on to a great point here, because it reminds me of what Rockefeller said at the Council on Foreign Relations, where he thanked the Washington Post and the Times of New York and all of that kind of thing for keeping their plan for the world secret. Because if the world had found out about their plan back then, they would have torn them apart. But now the world is more sophisticated, he said. All right, now, apropos that, just recently, I spoke with an individual who broke a story here in New Zealand, where there's this scientific advisor telling everybody take vaccines, wear your mask, and so on and so forth, named Susie Wiles. I call her Fraggle Rock. She got a big red curly hair. Anyway, she was taken a video of, allegedly in breach of lockdown, being a person in the position that she was. This guy took a video of it, and then he took it to the media. The media wouldn't report it. So he took it to every single media outlet. They wouldn't report it. And then until he finally got a off the wall, completely, we don't like that guy anymore, guy who's been discredited in the media many times. He actually managed to run it. And then after maybe 2 weeks of this happening and a week of the story actually being broke, then the mainstream media had to cover it. Now, something occurred to me right then, is that the editors of all of these mainstream media organizations who decide what gets reported and what doesn't are working for the intelligence agencies.
Yes. Yeah, it's ironic, there's always a CIA agent there. But speaking of
like Anderson Cooper,
Vanderbilt, he's a bit. But here's the thing, guys, if you missed out on Bitcoin, it's okay. I'm going to show you guys how to make a lot of money here. All you got to do is get the mainstream media to lie about you. So I think a lot of people actually, I know this is an American-based story, but a lot of people actually started asking me about Kyle Rittenhouse, who, are abroad. And if you're not familiar, he was at Kenosha. There was basically a riot breaking out. He defended himself. They made a lot of goofy things, like he crossed state lines. He had the wrong gun. He did this.
Which is pretty much all of that, as we discussed in the podcast not too long ago, is like all the stuff that he was accused of, right? What the left and a lot of people who were sort of against Kyle Rittenhouse, and they're like, okay, whatever, he defended himself, but why would you cross state lines with an legally cross state lines weapon you can't legally possess? And as it turns out, he didn't illegally cross state lines, and he didn't illegally possess a weapon, because 17-year-olds in the state of Wisconsin can possess a long-barreled rifle as an AR-15. So he was legally bearing arms. So like that whole argument is completely gone now. So it's like, did he defend himself or did he not? And it seems very clear to me.
We're talking about the end of truth and the end of dialogue between people who disagree here. And, I'm facing up to 15 months in jail. And when Jeffery introduced himself as somebody who spent from the age of 17, 16 years in jail, I'm thinking there's something we could all learn from this man.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear Jeff's take on this, because MSNBC was banned from the courtroom. If you're not familiar with this guy, MSNBC, for our listeners in Europe, in Australia, and other places, they're just a big left. They say they're unbiased, but they're far to the neoliberal ideology here in America. The man who identified himself as Morrison was pulled over Wednesday. He blew a red light after the thing, and he stated he had been instructed by a superior, probably an intelligence community in New York, to follow the jury bus. Police confirmed Thursday that there was an incident with a person alleging to be affiliated with a national media outlet. Police said this person was trying to photograph jurors, and the incident is investigated much further. Schroeder, if I'm saying that right, called the incident an extremely serious matter and banned any journalists from the MSNBC, the news network, from attending the ongoing trial. Now, what he said is he instructed no one from MSNBC will be permitted in the building for the duration of this trial. This is a very serious matter. So here's what I want to, really expound upon. This is, if you're in another country or even around the world, it's nice to see that at least judges, because the legal system, as long as we have it in the current way, does matter. And it's nice to see that judges are actually saying, fine, I'm not going to have the mainstream media come in here, paint a narrative, because what they want to do is paint a narrative, in my opinion, make him look in a bad light. People are not going to read articles. They'll read the headline and then change the public discourse so they can get what they want.
So they went from MSNBC to not being able to mess in with the news because the judge said so.
Well,
All right. And now this is a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I thought you were done. I'll wait for you.
I was good. I was done.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think with a lot of things with the Rittenhouse case, there's back and forward, and there's different ways you can frame and look at things. I think there's more than one legitimate line of reasoning. I mean, look, I think that the judge has really gone out of his way to make sure that this is a fair trial, and I think that that's really drawing a negative reaction to a lot of people on the left, a lot of the social justice advocates. But the truth of the matter is that, in terms of wrongful convictions, judges who are prejudiced, often there's a sarcastic phrase that's used in the legal profession called the second prosecutor in the room, and that's usually the judge, because a lot of them used to be prosecutors. So here, I think
that's a good point. Yeah.
So I think he's making a lot of rulings, trying to keep things fair. I can understand banning that particular person. I mean, he can claim he wasn't there to try to photograph any jurors or record them, but why was he following the van with the minute? I mean, that's bizarre. But so I understand what he's getting at. I don't think that they should have banned anybody at all from the whole network. I think that that's an overreaction, and I think it's a very dangerous thing for a judge to try to ban a media outlet in order to prevent the media from framing a certain narrative. I think I think that's a direct threat to a free press. I think the remedy to speech is more speech, not banning of speech.
Well, in New Zealand here, we have a critical issue with that, is the Prime Minister has said that she will only answer questions from accredited media. Now, incidentally, all the quote-unquote accredited media are ones who have taken not only $100 million in direct donations for the government as a COVID-19 bailout for lost revenue, etc., because of the lockdowns, but they've also been given another $900 million by the government in advertising revenue so it can play its COVID ads. All right. Now, in my opinion, that means that the accredited media have a billion reasons to not ask any real questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, if you're a part of the mainstream media, not only do you have no reason to ask questions, you have an incentive not to, because a lot of times people ask me, and I'll get into the next thing, why the media says this and that. And I said, it's very clear that they know what they're doing. It's not like they don't know Joe Rogan's not a scientist and Big Bird is. I guess Big Bird's an expert on science now, but someone's paying them to say what they have a script. It's the essential thing of, like, you give a celebrity a script and say you like Burger King, say you like this kind of shampoo, say you like whatever, and they say it.
Advertising.
Just advertising, yeah. They're basically paid, advertisers. I like the word prostitutes, to say whatever they want. I think the big thing I take away from Kyle Rittenhouse is not just the trial itself, but people, in my opinion, what the real takeaway is, self-defense. It's easy to see that, but the big thing is people want to frame the Kyle Rittenhouse in a specific way to say, hey, if you don't agree with our ideology, you shouldn't have a weapon to defend yourself. That's very strongly what I feel this is about, and that's why I think it's important to other countries and other places in the world.
I look at the self-defense issue. Again, I see how that could go either way, because on one hand, you do have, in terms of self-defense, you do have a right to protect yourself, and defense of others is also part of the definition of self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a way he has a colorable claim there. On the other hand, I mean, he came from another state and he's there with with a rifle, with not a rifle, but I think it's an AR, some kind of
Yes.
military grade item. I don't want to be quoted on the topic of it, but I mean, he comes from another area with a gun, with the AR thing, and he's running up and down on the streets, and so there is some plausibility. Well, were you there? Did you cause a situation to happen that you then had to defend yourself on? Because if you cause something, right, then you can't then claim self-defense, and there's some plausibility, to that line of reasoning either. So, to me, this is a really close call, both ways. And I think that the jury thinks the same thing. I mean, they wouldn't have been deliberating, for 3 days. I don't like that there has been prosecutorial misconduct in the case. I mean, the prosecutor commented on Rittenhouse's remaining silent. That's an absolute no-no.
Yeah.
And they got admonished strongly from the judge. And again, most of us, when we suffer from misconduct in the courtroom, the judge isn't saying anything. And so normally, it's what's interesting about all of this dynamic is that normally the crowd that would be cheering in favor of the judge finally stepping up against prosecutorial misconduct doesn't quite feel that way because of what the facts of the case are and who the defendant is. And I do think that his ideological bent is somewhat playing a role in this, as you alluded to. So I do think there's some validity on that when you mentioned that.
Yeah, and speaking especially of that, it's going to be interesting to see what goes on. And a lot of people are watching the media on this one. A lot of people are broadcasting it. And then a lot of times I tell people, hey, the media is all paid and bought for. And they're like, can you prove it? Kareem, I know you're saying, okay, that Bill Gates is giving money to the media. But a lot of people, when you make a claim, they ask for a source. And that's fine. That's fine. Because
can I just illustrate that? If you are American or a New Zealander and you want to prove to somebody in your country that the pharmaceutical companies own the media, tell them to turn on the TV and wait for a commercial break. Yeah. There's your proof right there. They're advertising their stuff to you, direct to market, all over it. How much revenue are they putting in? Maybe you don't know, but the point is they are putting revenue in. And what does money do to people when you've got a hell of a lot of it coming in and you find out that it's dishonest money? You know what you'll do? You will do whatever a corrupt church does. You will burn your prophets who tell you about your corrupt church instead of the corrupt building.
Exactly. And then if you guys see it, I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan, who's actually on Tim Pool's podcast. I have a lot of people there. But a lot of people...
that podcast was extraordinary.
It was. We'll get there, though. We'll get there. But one thing that a lot of people that I said is, hey, Bill Gates is funding, that Bill Gates. And a lot of people said, prove it, prove it, prove it. I finally found the document that's saying he's giving $319 million to media outlets and over 30,000 grants in the company's database. So where did it go?
Well, here's the question. Where did that money that he's giving away actually come from? Because I've got articles right here where New Zealand gave $40 million to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And he's also now been given permission to build a data cloud infrastructure here in New Zealand for the very first time. So, it's I think there might be a back and forth. And what they do is they give money back to themselves after they get given it by themselves.
Yeah. And I would definitely imagine it probably came from that, probably came from this society. That society is hard to sometimes keep track of it. If we just take a look, like we have NPR, The Guardian, Univision. When also why this is important is, CNN, why this is important is a lot of times you get fact checked. A lot of times people say this is misinformation or disinformation. We want to counter it. And you have to ask, where are these fact checkers coming from? Why is the media saying all the same things all the same time? It's not like one or two people or a few people are giving them millions of dollars, and it actually is. If you total up the donations, it's over 166 million. And a lot of this goes to things like, CNN. A lot of this goes to saying different things that they want, that Bill Gates wants them to say.
He even gave money to an organization there called Bell and Whistle. Like literally, it's like they're throwing it in our face. It's like how big is your media bribery package? Well, I've got all the bells and whistles.
Yeah. And actually, he's also given 63 million. He says to charities and big media outlets, to BBC, to MTV's Staying Alive Foundation, to New York. So wherever you're at in the world, he's giving something, generally probably, to your media association. It's John. I used to think, okay, he's just giving it to American media outlets like CNN. Then I dig more, and then I see like the National Newspapers Publish Association, Washington News Council, and they're also giving it to journalists and different things like that, even to China. So I don't think this should be shocking now. He even has media projects that are being supported by him, which is just an amazing one. If I had to talk about this,
it's also a shell game as well. Like, for example, if you look at the donors to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation and all of that kind of stuff, you'll find out that, again, all of these people are all connected, and they may have given similar grants to the media and so on and so forth throughout the years. Then you double onto that, the buying of Fox by Disney, the buying of Marvel, and the buying of the Star Wars franchise, and so on and so forth, the extra conglomeration of things. You add on to that the Xing out throughout the alternative media through all these platforms and things like that. Boom, you got all this memory hole activity going on right now. This is a dangerous time to be a journalist.
I think the danger is also the fun part. And I'm going to get into some European stuff. Did you have anything to add, Aaron?
No, they're fascinated listening, guys. One thing in particular I didn't want to interrupt there when you came on to speak about the Rittenhouse topic, which I'm fascinated by, and many people are in Ireland, is it's taken over the media and our social media news feeds for sure. But I believe it was Vinny. Vinny mentioned something crucial, and it caught my attention there regarding the media and money paid for advertising. Just very briefly, I want to go back onto that. That is huge here in Ireland. We believe even minute, independent, and very, very small media outlets are receiving like 93,500 euros. It's a large amount of money, and the advertising, the propaganda campaigns, the fear mongering that has taken place here, guys. I will send you on some of maybe the adverts or some of the local media advertising.
Aaron, if I may, I'd like you to finish your point, and then I'll give you an illustration, my impression of the ads, of the similar ad structures that we have here in New Zealand. But please finish your point.
I can't wait for that. But no, I just wanted to pick that up. I think it was crucial that Vinny mentioned it. And Vinny's 3/4 of the way around the world compared to me. This is going on in every country between me and Vinny. It's going on in my little country of 5 million people. And you have a lot of people basically being shocked into their homes and put into a lockdown situation where I believe you have elderly people who are vulnerable and gullible listening to mainstream media narratives, to mainstream media news, and they are listening to this as though it's gospel for the sake of another word. And I have interacted with individuals in the Republic of Ireland who haven't left their houses for 200 days straight, because they believe in this killer virus that is out there. You're talking about individuals who have buried loved ones with 20 members of their family in attendance. I'm talking about families who have 140 members in a family having to play a lotto game or whittle down members to attend a grandmother's funeral. This has taken place in my country, where big Irish families have had to hand select individuals to attend a family funeral. This is not on. I'm sure it's taken place in your country to a degree, in some way, shape, or form, where funerals and weddings have been impeded by our government. Mm-hmm. We have to speak about this, and we're in a perfect position tonight as 5 gentlemen from 5 different backgrounds, from 5 different localities. I do not believe that the narrative in every constituency and every local area of every country in the world is being put across. And I think individuals like us need to do that, because the mainstream media news outlets like we're discussing are never going to give opportunities to individuals like us or people who are speaking out in their countries. And I'll leave it at that.
No, there you
That's right. And when you come home from 28 days in 28 hours, sorry, in prison, when fairly insignificant by comparison to the punishment that many people in this world have endured. But when you're banned from the internet, this is what you come home to. You try to listen to 80s music, and in the first 15 minutes, an ad break comes on, and there's 2 government ads. This is a COVID-19 announcement. You better get your vaccines. You don't want to be one of those anti-vaxxer bastards. And then in the half-hour point, the host, who doesn't seem to be able to read a script very well, get your jab. You don't want to be one of those anti-vaxxer bastards. And then on the 45-minute mark, you have another 2 government ads. This is a COVID-19 announcement. And then on the hour mark, you get a news break. And this is every hour while you're trying to listen to 80s music. Welcome to the evening news. Well, we've had a hell of a lot more cases today, and everybody needs to get their vaccine. Thank goodness we're all in lockdown. And now it's time for a commercial break. This is a COVID-19 announcement. Happy birthday to you. And now it's time for Dave with the traffic report. Yeah, g'day everybody. The traffic's backed up for miles outside the COVID testing stations, the drive-in vaccination centres, also very heavy traffic out there. So get on down there now. You'll be able to get in line very, very quickly because there's no traffic anywhere else because it's locked down. And now it's time for the music report. G'day everybody. You're going to be able to get down to Rhythm and Vines this summer, mate, because if you're double jabbed and you've got the little COVID tracer app thingy on your wristband that traces every single person that you bump into and every single store that you go to in real time, you'll be able to party with other people if you're socially distanced 2 meters away from them. And we're not just telling you this because the government threatened to withdraw our franchise if we didn't capitulate to their new demands and then tell all the other artists to get in on it. Anyway, here's Karen with the weather. Hi, everybody. New Zealand's going to be having some great weather today because the showers have decided to self-isolate.
Wow.
On this real quick. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say I'm really impressed with all those impressions. If they're doing that many impressions, I do want to meet the voiceover artists.
Yeah.
That evil, but yeah. Sorry, Dan.
Okay, but one thing I want to say quickly on what just said, right, about the Rittenhouse and about the mainstream narrative, but mainly about propaganda, right? And as I was talking about in my most recent podcast, it was just me. I was talking about fear, right? Because I'm looking at all this, what you're all looking at, what you're all talking about from a psychological perspective, right? Because that's what I'm most versed in, right? Is psychology and economics, what I'm most versed in entirely. So what I'm looking at I'm looking at fear, not as a reaction, but as a weapon of propaganda, right? Because propaganda does not work unless it's information, right? Unless the distribution of information has an effect, right? If you're trying to distribute propaganda or information, your goal is to get a reaction, right? And if your information that you're distributing is not getting any reaction, well, then it's not fulfilling the definition of propaganda, right? You want to either change minds or have people think in one way, whatever it may be, right? The former or the latter, right? But how do you make the distribution of information not only more effective, but more potent, right? Because when we're talking about information, we're talking about its quality and its quantity. How do you get out the most amount of information in the most efficient way to affect the most people and have the largest effect possible? Well, everyone has different fears and everyone fears to a different degree. But there's one universal fear as human beings that we have, which is the inevitability of death. And when you propagate a narrative that is the constant reminder of death and obliteration, the one universal fear. Now, that does not mean that we all think of death in a similar way. There's still a differentiation, but nonetheless, it's universal. We all die. We all die. And at one point in our life, I'm sure you're safe to say that you've had a fear about dying. Now, when you emphasize death in an exaggerated manner, and you do this on a mass scale, it makes people fear. And what does fear do? As we know neurologically and physiologically, it activates something called fight or flight, right? And what most people don't know is the majority of the global population choose flight. Less than 7% of all people on this planet choose flight. right? Let's choose fight. Most people choose flight. And the reason why that is because the ways our brains were hardwired, we are not hardwired to directly act in conflict. There's been millions and millions of years of evolutionary biology, which has led to this. Now, the small portion of people who do choose fight, well, they're immune to this. They're literally almost entirely immune, right? Because their reaction is not to run away and hide in their house and be safe and virtue signal. No, it's to fight, right? They're almost contrarian in nature. But the larger majority of the population, which is flight, even people who are freedom-minded individuals, even leftists and people on the right who've always been an enchanter of liberty and freedom and civil rights. But guess what? When that fear activates that flight mode, they are now in a chemical state which their whole way of being is altered in a way that they can't even necessarily control it. Therefore, when you enter flight mode, you retreat, not only in a physical way, but in a psychological way. And then you add to this the continuation of this, right? And I was talking about this, value sets, right? What were they showing you on CNN and MSNBC? A specific value set. They were showing you the number of people who've died, the number of people who are hospitalized, and the number of people who are infected. Now, they did not show you the total fatality rate. They did not show you the amount of people who got past the illness with absolutely no effects at all. And they decided to show you a specific set of values, which was the negative set, which was done intentionally. Now, I don't know whose idea or if there was one person or a group of individuals, but it's obvious to me that they particularly chose specifically to choose that set of values to propagate fear. And then therefore, when people are in flight mode, it's much easier to influence them through propaganda. Now we have where we are today.
Yes, and actually,
I really do have a bunch to expand on that, and I agree with you that yes, this is indeed happening. What I also believe is happening here is that it's not just the fight or flight. There's actually 5 reptilian brain responses. Fight is that thing coming at me, something I can kill. Flight, do I have to get away from it to save my life? Freeze, do I just have to sit here until it goes away? And submit, okay, I have to do what this thing tells me. And attach, I've been enslaved by this thing for so long that I love it so much.
I love all
when that puts things into a lot greater perspective when you look at the propaganda and the brainwashing technique, and when you're trying to talk to people who seem so enamored and in love with these people who are enslaving and killing them.
Yeah, it's crazy. And actually, if you go to the One Great Network, Mark Passio really breaks down the R complex very good. But if you stay in fight or flight, that tends to be a response. So actually, since Aaron Joyce is here and Vinny, let's take a tour of Europe, because exactly what you're talking about segues into what I'm seeing that's happening in Europe, happened in Australia, could definitely happen in America and Canada. And Germany actually announced new COVID restrictions because what are they doing? They're showing fear. Oh, death, but they're not showing you real statistics. They're showing, oh, cases are going up. How many people are actually okay from that? Well, we don't know because they're not going to show you that. But they're getting people in the R complex. So what is Merkel doing? I don't know how the heck people put up with Merkel, but whatever. I don't live there, so Aaron can probably give me more insight. But the outgoing chancellor, thank God, Angela Merkel, basically said on Thursday on a new package to tackle a 4th wave. They just keep making up waves. Many of the measures we're announcing would not be necessary if more people got this medical procedure. Oh, okay, put fear into them, make them do what you want. The package includes a limit on public life in the areas that exceed a certain threshold of hospital admissions. And she said the country was considering making it mandatory for hospital staff to get it. So what are they doing? Several cities and states impose more measures, and you have to show passes now, which says if you've recovered or not. They're known as 2G rules. I get what, does it keep going? Do you get the 5G now? Are you a phone? In order to access bars, restaurants, and public venues, movie theaters, or museums. According to Germany's Deutsche Welle outlet, if more than 3% of the 100,000 inhabitants in a region are hospitalized with the disease, then 2G rule will apply for all public leisure states except Hamburg, Lower Saxony, I can't pronounce that one, and Saarland are above all. And actually, just to kind of knock these three stories into one. Greece and the latest EU, which I understand why Aaron's EU skeptic. I'm EU skeptic. Heck, I'm 50 state skeptic right now, as me and Danny have talked about. They're slapping more COVID curbs on unvaccinated, doing pretty much the same thing. Greece, they say, is 62%, but that's not good enough for them.
One second, Kareem. Isn't it obvious that this isn't about health anymore?
No.
Isn't it obvious that this is political,
Yeah, I kept telling people that, it's a public health issue. But then I'm like, look, I have a question. If you get over 50%, if you have all of these people who are getting it, and if it works, if it actually works, if the product you're saying works, if the procedure you're saying works, how is it a pandemic of them? Shouldn't the product you're taking to protect you and not have other people? So there's new rules in Greece.
I think the fact of the matter is, Kareem, that my umbrella doesn't work unless you're using one, okay?
Yes. You have to open your umbrella for someone else not to get. I can't even follow this anymore. Just ridiculous. Greece is saying now they have certifications. Those over 60 will be valid for 7 months, and encourage them to get a third procedure, and worshipers attending church will be allowed to enter with a negative test. And I'm not.
I mean, the question is, what are they worshipping then? Are they worshipping their God still, or are they worshipping the fact that the negative test allowed them to do it?
I've long maintained that this has actually become a non-secular religion like politics. And last but not least, we have Slovakia, the second European country to force rules on vaccinated people and people who did not get this procedure. And it comes after neighboring Austria reintroduced lockdown for people who did not get this procedure, be announced in days. And they're doing basically the same thing. They're saying we need to significantly tighten restrictions 3 weeks to calm the situation down. And that's primarily
very fast for a place called Slovakia.
So yeah, I love Aaron's take on this, and it seems to me Germany, Austria, Greece, and Slovakia, if we put them all in one, definitely just completely doubled down on everything. However, the funny thing is, I would say two things. One, if this procedure works so great, then why is it happening? Why is it an issue of people who didn't get it if that thing works? Second of all, I would even ask them, like, dude, you're in Europe. You probably heard of the Black Plague. That knocked out, I think, almost
nearly a third of the population.
A third of the population, bro.
Yeah, forget the bubonic plague. Forget the plague, though. Think about measles. Think about polio, right? Think about these illnesses and viruses and diseases that had over a 4 and 5% fatality rate, 10% fatality rate, right? The idea that this virus, which is 93 to 97%, depending on your age range, if you're under 18, it's closer to 99.1%, right? It's not to say that people don't die from this virus. And it's not even a utilitarian argument that I'm making as to you choose the policy that benefits the most versus the least. It's the fact that this virus does not call for the reaction that has been displayed of many, many, many countries. And if you look at all these countries that had this exaggerated reaction through economic policy, through lockdowns, which one of the most ironic and dangerous thing about these lockdowns was that we instantaneously mimicked a communist totalitarian state. China was the first country to lock down. Now, their lockdown was much more extreme and draconian than ours. But the idea that because we were so oblivious and so obliterated and we were caught so off guard that our politicians thought it would be a good idea to mimic the policy of a totalitarian communist state, which has millions of forced labor workers, people who make 10 cents an hour. They have to put up suicide nets just so they don't kill themselves. The idea that we mimic that nation and what their response was, and we didn't just do it after thinking, we did it immediately. Within 3 weeks, we did exactly what China did, and so did the rest of the world. And I don't necessarily think it was China that was telling other countries. I simply think that the state, or like the left tends to say, the fragility of our democracy is much more deeper than we thought. And I don't even like democracy. I'm just saying if there is this pretend democracy and if this thing is what our government is, even though our founding fathers were more on the side, like if you the compass, right? They were way more towards and anarchic state than democracy. Thomas Jefferson's famous quote, democracy is simply a system where 51% of the people get to take the rights away of the other 49, right? So they were inherently and vehemently against democracy. They were anti-democracy, right? Because they saw what had happened in previous states where democracy became prevalent. It simply turned into the majority take all and rule over the minority. What we saw was not only this instantaneous imitation of what China did, we saw that even after there was data, large numbers of data, large, vast studies of data that showed that this action, this policy, this response was not effective, it still continued. And what do people say and sort of to counter that? Well, they didn't want to have responsibility over their citizens. They didn't want to bear responsibility over the people which elected them. I mean, that is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy also to me. It's happening in like Vinny and Dan were saying, it's happening all over the world. And Aaron, I'd love your perspective on like a lot of these European countries, because you're in that continent, you're in the side of the world, like Germany, Austria, Slovakia. That they did it pretty fast in Slovakia, even Greece. Why particularly? And I know you're dealing with it as well. Why particularly do you think it's the European Union, or is there something else that's making them push down so fast and hard? We're talking about Brussels earlier.
Yeah, well, guys, I'm fascinated listening to you there, and I'm Daniel when he was explaining there in the Chinese situation, etc. When he's explained there, some people may find his statement or the way he explained that a bit strong, but he's 100% correct, and you know, a lot of what has been, I suppose, outlined or projected by, we'd say, the European Union. And you say, who's doing this? I do believe in some form that there is an elite or there is an organization, committee of some description behind this. Like, we have to start talking about this. Like, Ireland is a country, a very, very small country within the EU. We make up a very, very, very small percentage of the EU. Let's face it, right? We put a lot of money into it. We've gotten a lot out of it. I'm Eurosceptic, as you said. I have my reasons. You know, we own 6.9% of the assets in our country at the moment. That is ridiculous. Our fisheries is down to about 7%. Look at Vinny's face. This is a joke. You know, like, this is a reality. This is not a joke, in fact. It's a joke.
Well, I mean, it's just, I know what my prime minister did to your country when the banking system gave all the people sweetheart tax breaks for moving all their back offices where they were selling derivatives into your country, and then they just skipped out without paying any tax, and then the entire economy imploded behind them.
Google and Apple, if Google and Apple paid us a percentage of the taxes that they get break or get off with here in our country, our children and our economy would be in a much better position. And we are very grateful to those companies for jobs. That gets thrown in my face when I bring it up. But it's great to have the jobs. It's great to have those people paying taxes. But forgive me for saying so, it's those people that are contributing to their own life and their own initiatives, which is great. But the company is making very, very large profits and just skedaddling out of Ireland with it. And I don't think that is fair. But I want to go back to the nitty-gritty that we're speaking about. We're speaking about European countries and the effects of COVID-19 and the rules, regulations, or guidelines implemented. We spoke about Germany. You spoke about Greece, Austria. Austria stands out to me. Look at what they have done. They have implemented a curfew on healthy people who refuse a vaccine, on people who are using their right and initiative and usage of bodily integrity. They are expressing that right. And they are basically being locked up from a specific time to a specific time. Have a curfew, have a lockdown. This is crazy. In our country, we now have the same. We have curfew, so to speak, at midnight. Everywhere is closed. Clubs, nightclubs, everywhere has to close at midnight. It seems to me that COVID-19 comes out at 12:01 a.m. This is what happens across Europe. Everywhere now closes. You can have people in a dressing room. GAA, I'm sure you're familiar, guys, with our local national sport, the Gaelic football and hurling. And you have 15 players. So you could have a dressing room with managers and coaches of 30 in each dressing room. So you have 60 guys in two dressing rooms next to one another. You have no issue. If you have 30 people who want to go to a theatre or a cinema, You have to have vaccinations and COVID certificates and passports. None of these guidelines or regulations, gentlemen, make sense in my country, nor do they make sense in yours. I've looked.
No, they don't.
I do not understand how there is not more conversations like the five of us are having all over the internet.
Yeah.
I think it might have something to do with the fact that they ban every single one of us who tries.
Yeah.
Who does it to any measurable effect?
Yeah.
Who is it's just, let's face facts here.
Mhm.
The world is not run by people like us, who are reasonable, who are decent, who admit that they're wrong, who can take criticism, that kind of thing. We're being run by pathological, narcissistic, psychopathic, satanic child traffickers, okay? So when you look at everything that's going on, you go, oh, this doesn't make any sense. That doesn't seem to have the evidence or not backing it up. I'm telling you that, yes, it does make sense, but only if you're a child trafficking psychopathic pedophile, all right? They'd look at the same story you look at, and they wouldn't be confused at all. They'd be like, well, of course, everything's going according to plan.
The biggest thing is, guys, this is my big thing, I just cannot understand. There's been lie after lie after lie. They've been caught, all over Europe, all over the world. Come on. They've tripped themselves up how many times now? And yet the people believed the next promise or the next statement. It's going to be different this time.
Well,
No, it's not.
it is actually.
There was a it was like when Bill Hicks said he really loved the show Cops because every night it's the same show. A woman has been beaten by her husband. Her head looks like a melon.
Oh, I remember that.
The cops are called to their trailer because the trailer next door couldn't hear her the results of the American Gladiators competition over her screaming. I don't know why they called. I don't know how they had a phone, but she's saying, he's a good man. Don't take him away. All he did was run over my head while I was lying down in the driveway. He's a good man. Don't take him away. I think we're talking about global battered wife syndrome here, man. I think everybody has basically become some sort of a retrofitted psychological version of a trailer park, trailer trash, battered wife syndrome hussy. All right, that's what I'm talking about here, bro.
I have some solutions, though. There is some good news here, if you guys want. That's actually what I was going to end on, is two good stories, and I'll get your opinion on both of those. Especially Jeff said, I mentioned Oklahoma. Taiwan. Okay, we talked about China, but Taiwan actually said no to this procedure. And that's actually a nice thing, even though they ordered it and thing that they're not, from what I hear, they're not going to do mandates. I'm looking through the We Are Change Telegram, but they reject the request of emergency use. So really all you have to do is say no, in my opinion. So Taiwan basically said no. The health minister, Chen Xin-chung, expressed regret that EUA had not been granted. We still have to follow certain standards, but the biggest thing is they're not going to use emergency use authorization. But that's one way. They're saying no, and they're kind of doing it peacefully. I mentioned Oklahoma because I had like one of those moments, if you saw the preacher saying, Jesus, I see what you're doing for other people and you want it for me. Come from an Islamic background, so maybe it's Allah. I see what you're doing for people and want it in my state. But they've been trying this in Oklahoma. If you're familiar, it's a state in the union. And I don't have the article to it. Luke Rudowski did bring this up, though. I really liked it. The defense official says if the Oklahoma National Guard doesn't comply with these requirements, they will no longer be maintaining national recognition. The state will no longer have a National Guard, but here's a bad word, a militia, VOA's Pentagon correspondent. And I will try and find the article. But what I think is interesting is they're painting militia as a bunch of, like, I guess, unruly guys who are running around. And I do see that is a way to stop it because, as Mark Passio said, where Vinny's on the One Great Network, if they lose the order followers, there's not a whole lot they can do. They can say, you do this, and you tell them no. And then it comes down to the fact of you not complying. So I think this is going to be interesting to see what Oklahoma does. And
just off of that issue onto another side issue is the PCR test that is being used, all right, accurate? Okay, because the medical health professionals around the world have been coming around this. So every time we have cases or deaths or anything reported that's COVID related or anything like that, the only test they are using to prove this is one that doesn't give any accurate information. It gives overwhelming false positives. So is there a virus? Is there a pandemic? And here's the thing. Let's say theoretically there was no virus, there was no pandemic, and it was all just a scam purported through the media using fake tests to justify its existence, that they can tell anything that it is. And it's actually just a direct global takeover by ruthless criminal sociopaths who now have the means. They didn't before, but they now have the means to control the entirety of the global media, and they've been brainwashing humanity for over 100 years to not know the difference between a fact and a lie. And now they're capable of pushing us right into a new world order. People will pay for themselves to be orderly exterminated. Those are the words of Henry Kissinger in 2009. He says, if you can mandate vaccination, you can mandate anything. You can mandate organ harvesting, executions, that kind of thing. And the people that are running these pharmaceutical companies, he said, you're going to become obscenely wealthy because people will be paying you for their own extermination.
True, but here's the thing I don't think they counted on is a lot of the people like Mark Passio says, the Order followers, or people who are part of Oklahoma, which, Jeff, if you want to chime in, that was my last story about Oklahoma. I'd love to hear it. But if people start saying no, people just start saying no, which it seems to me people are. Even though these places are locking down, people are saying no. And if you say no and you have a standoff and you have the ability to say, I'm not going to do what you tell me, literally what Rage Against the Machine should be saying and doing now, but I am, but whatever, it's fine because, like I'm saying, the Oklahoma National Guard saying we're not going to do this. That's a very good step. If more people who are under their command just say, no, we're not doing it, there's nothing they can do. And I've often made the argument if they don't have the access to centralized military and police, all they would be doing is sitting in a room saying, I want to control this, and nothing would happen. Jeff, you did say something about if I meant Oklahoma, and I did. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, perhaps more than a lot. I really value freedom. For obvious reasons, considering my background. And look, I don't think that people should be, mandated to do vaccination. I don't think people should be fired, should lose jobs, over that. And I think that's really dangerous to surrender that.
Yeah, no, I fully 100% agree. So those are the stories we covered, guys. We talked a little bit about the Rittenhouse trial. Media is kicking people out. You can judge if that's good or bad, but it's going to be interesting. I'm really interested to see what the result of this is.
I just want to say something about Jeffrey is that generally the people who value freedom the most are the ones who know what it feels like to have it taken away. And generally the people who are most trepidatious about going into war are the people who know what it looks like.
Yeah,
sure. On that note, let me just add one quick. I mean, I live in New York City, and I have to, you have to, in order to get into restaurants, you have to produce a card, with it on it, and it does feel kind of like it's a police state, and what's the next step on that?
Yeah, I'd say you go either way. Do people follow it or do they say no? Even I saw Black Lives Matter, which a lot of people say, okay, fine, they did a lot of bad things during the summer, but I even said, fine, they're going against it. So
well, because they're authoritarian at heart. So it's like they want to do what the hell they want to do. When you're authoritarian, when you want to express your power over people, you don't like when others are expressing their power over you, even if it's a state, which generally you obey or pretend to obey. Anyways, on that note,
You shouldn't do this to us. We want to burn more cop cars.
Listen, one thing I want to say is a famous quote by a person named H.L. Mencken. And what that person said, what that individual says, is the average man does not want to be free. He simply wants to be safe, right? And he said this in a famous essay on safety, on liberty, and what he followed that up by saying was, safety does in fact outweigh freedom because there's more of a sense of security in safety than in freedom, right? So if the average man does not want to be free, he simply wants to be safe. But we have to look at the current state of our nation, look at the current state of multiple nations globally, and we see where have we gone in the last 100 years, right? This quote was written long ago, but not that long, but long enough. Where have we gone? Have we gone in the direction more of tyranny or more of liberty, whether it be through libertarian-esque, whether it be through constitutional republic? Have we tended towards tyranny or liberty more? And I'd say we've tended towards security and safety more. And one of the most mind-boggling things of, I'd say, the last 15 to 20 years was the uncovering of the NSA and CIA documents that they collect mass surveillance on our population. Not only on our population, they collect mass surveillance on multiple countries, including the EU. They all work together to share collected mass data, and they're all able to look at people's privacy, go in your camera, look at your cell phones, look at your apps, look at your data usage, and they can all do this whenever the hell they choose to, not because they just started doing it, but because after a disastrous event like 9/11, it was a bad thing. Now, we can talk about the inception and as to whether the government knew. Forget what led up to that. Let's just talk about what it was. It was a bad thing. And what it did was, again, that fight or flight mode, but it really got to the emotional core of Americans. And you had a large majority of Republicans sign off on something called the Patriot Act. If you're in another country and you're not familiar with it, it was an act signed shortly after 9/11 to help fight the war on terror, which is one of the most vaguest wars you can fight, considering terror is basically a subjective fucking definition. Anything can be terrorist. There's no legal grounds to really, other than the classifications of terror, but no one declared war on Afghanistan. No one declared war on Iraq. No one declared war on Syria. We simply declared war on terror, which was then used as a pretext to bomb 7 different countries. But anyways, that act, that bill that was placed because of a fear of a threat to our freedom, whether it was an exaggerated fear or not, whether all the politicians really truly feared it, or they really knew it wasn't a threat, but they wanted to pass this bill to expand the powers of the state. Regardless of the reasoning behind it, it happened. And the majority of Americans went along with it. And in that act, in that Patriot Act, contained a button. And that button was simply this: we can look at you whenever you want because we want to defend your safety and security. We're doing it for you. We're doing it for the Americans. We're doing it because we want to protect you from terror. And as that happened, we realized that our government, after every major crisis, and this was after the Vietnam War, after World War II, has installed and implemented policy in the name of a crisis to then expand their powers and diminish individual liberties. And they continue to do this. And if anyone wants to doubt me, look at COVID. It was the closest thing to 9/11 we had, right? What do we have? A Build Back Better bill, which has not passed yet. But in that bill, it would do something, and you can disagree whether you like this or not, but I think there's no doubt doubting its sort of invasiveness, is that it would mandate that all cars by 2024 have to contain biometric scanning technology to measure people's heat and alcohol blood levels. So to prevent, in the name of preventing accidents. Now, I don't know about you, but that might sound very good on its heart, right? But do you really want by 2024 every new car to be mandated to have technology that biometrically scans your face? Well, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if that policy is worth the effect on civil liberties and privacy. And I don't think it is. But here's the deal. The average man does not want to be free. He simply wants to be safe. So as they keep pushing these policies, which are predicated on protecting your safety and securing you security, more people will still continue to go along with it because they're scared, they're fearful, and they're not willing to stand up for liberty because, again, as H.L. Mencken said, he simply wants to be safe, not free.
Yeah, and actually Michael Malice said that a lot on Tim Pool, and I love that quote because I do find it to be very, very true, because a lot of what these authoritarians say is, oh, we don't want to control, we want you to be safe. So that's
it's said that you can live a comfortable life or a heroic life. You cannot do both.
No.
Before the Lusitania was sunk by German U-boats, nobody would have expected the entire world would be at war. Before the Reichstag building was burned down in Germany, nobody would have expected a Department of Homeland Security to control everything Germans did. Before the 2008 financial crisis, nobody would have allowed the banks to just take money directly out of your accounts and just make money up and give it to them. Before 9/11, nobody would have allowed you to
they've been doing that.
Everything
they've been doing that since 1913 of the implementation of the
Federal
Reserve.
That's what I'm talking about. Now, that means that we are in a long-term plan here, and what these people are going for is the full implementation of Agenda 21, the complete real-time global control and monitoring of every animal, vegetable, mineral, and information source. This is what they want. I put it in a sci-fi context where humanity at one point created a AI global control grid called Omnis, and it was created by the elite to keep humans basically farmed at sustainable levels. But something happened. The elite became so bored with having no restrictions and raping and murdering and pillaging and destroying became boring for them that they started doing it so much that the AI started to begin to think that its own creators were a threat and then wipe them out. Now, I think this is basically what is about to happen right now, is that we are in a war between the forces of life against the forces of anti-life. All right. And in this war, some people will choose good, some people will choose evil, while most will sit on the fence to see who comes out on top. Now, what I'm trying to do is burn the fence down.
All right. That's actually a perfect ending to this, because, guys, if you sit on the sidelines during history, most people have sat on the sidelines, during World War II. And I really like the meme that says, well, if you think you would have complied during, a little bit back, if you think you would have complied during 1940.
Who's got the background noise there? There
Okay.
we go. That was Aaron. All right. Cool. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah. No, I'll unmute you that. But if you think you
would have complied,
if you would have complied during the Weimar Republic, now you know. You actually know now what you would have done. Most of history is written by the victor, so there's people who sit on the sidelines and they'll just go with whoever. Michael Malice did make that clear. I agree. So there's people who want total control and people who want freedom. Be on the side of freedom, and here's how you can do it with our amazing gentlemen today: Vinny Eastwood, Jeff Deskovic, and Aaron Joyce, and my co-host Daniel B. Where can you find them? You can find Jeff at the Deskovic Foundation. He helps people who've been wrongly convicted, because he was himself. He's dedicated to the exoneration of people who have been wrongly convicted. He's helped out a lot of people. I'm really impressed with how you've done this, Jeff. And when people are wrongly convicted, they can lose their life. They can lose their livelihood.
They lose their ability to pursue happiness. And you don't really know one thing that me and Jeffrey, why I really wanted to talk to him, is because I spent 2 years, close to 2 years of my teen years in jail or juvenile detention, 6 months in a group home, around a year in juvenile detention. And one thing about it that's so dehumanizing, that's so demoralizing, is the inability to not only do as you want, but to simply do basic things in the normal world that you would just do, right? But now you have to ask for permission to do. When I was in detention center, I would have to ask just to use the bathroom. And if I used the bathroom when I didn't ask, I could have been posing a security threat to the unit, Therefore, I would have to be put in my cell for not asking permission to use the bathroom. And, at nights, sometimes when I would have to use the bathroom, I'd have no toilet paper, right? So what do I have to do? I have to bang on the door as loud as I can. And some staff, they heard you banging, but they simply wouldn't grab you toilet paper. So now I have to use the bathroom with my sheets because the staff won't give you toilet paper, right? That feeling of going through that on a daily basis really, really, really attaches freedom to your psyche more so than the average man. Because not only have you lost it, it's been used in your face as a weapon, as an incentive. Do this, and we'll give you more of this. It's been manipulated. It's been dangled in front of you like a treat to get you to do things. You've been manipulated by the fact that they have control over what you do, right? And that feeling is like, it's one of the worst.
Yeah, it is one of the worst. Well, actually, one interesting thing with what's going on now is people like, well, if you just comply, if you just do what they say, they'll give you freedom
it
back.
gets worse.
I'm like, dude, that's how prison works. So if you've ever been wrongly convicted, if you know someone, if you have a family member or friend, I recommend go to the Desovic Foundation. And if you believe in what he's doing, which I do, go ahead and donate. I want to say thank you very much to Vinny. He's the one who got me started doing this. Him and Luke Rudowski. You can find him on the One Great Network, started by Mark Passio. His goal was to get the best creators in the truth movement and in the freedom movement here. And you can find Vinny by clicking on creators, Vinny Eastwood. You can donate to him. You can also go to his website at the Vinny Eastwood Show, all one word, .com.
And I'd like to just add one point on that is I remember I was talking to Cliff High this one time, and I said to him, humanity is kind of like a spring. This is what our spirit is like. And then when you try to hold down a spring, that spring will resist you all the way down. And even once you get it all the way down, you have to keep it down with all your power. Otherwise, it'll just pop right back up. And Cliff told me, no, Vinny, use an organic example. Our spirit, no matter how much freedom is taken away from us, is like a water spring. What happens when you try to push down water that is bursting its way to the surface? It starts burrowing sideways through rock, through dirt, and through sand, and bursting through to the surface from places you could not predict nor comprehend. That is what our spirit truly is like. Hold us down if you dare.
Yeah, and actually, I have a lot of, even what's going on, I still have a lot of faith in humanity. I had this conversation, actually.
I don't, but yeah.
I mean, we can agree, and I'd love to have a debate on that where you think, I do have faith in humanity despite everything's happening, despite all the trend, despite everything, I still have, even though I'm wrong, I have an optimistic look on it. Also,
I don't have faith in humanity, but you, Kareem, I got faith in you.
Well, I have faith.
I know lots of people who are the kind of people who reward your faith in them because they're good men and they will sacrifice what they have to in order to continue being good men. Our integrity sells for so little and it can be wiped away in an instant. And I'm very glad to know and have been here with all of you because you all, like myself, I hope, have integrity and will not compromise it.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say real quick is just I don't have faith in humanity per se, but I have faith in humanity's ability to consist and persist through utter hell and utter obliteration. There's been times where right now it's bad, right? From even a global standpoint, things seem bad, very bad. You look at Australia and you realize that things can go from democratic to Nazi Germany or Soviet Union in less than 2 years, right? You look at Australia, and that should be the turning point of where things can go if you do continue to comply. But through World War II, through World War I, through the bubonic plague, as we were talking about, through all these terrible things, which none of them, not a single one of them, could obliterate humanity in the long run. Yeah, they'd caused many damages. Millions died. Wars were fought. But at the end of the day, it always seems like liberty, there's a battle between liberty and tyranny, and it's fought, and tyranny seems to win temporarily. But in the long term, liberty always prospers in one form or another.
Yes, and I think, looking at Aaron Joyce, who's a member of the Irish Freedom Party, where do you find that? At irishfreedom.ie. You have liberty does win, but you got to support people who are doing it through collective action, not collectivism. Getting people together organically, fighting. That's what I believe Aaron is doing. And I believe they will succeed in freeing Ireland. And actually, all you need is one European country to do it really well. I think Romania is doing well. But if you can have one European country do it very well, maybe even get away from the EU, get away from the British, who needs necessarily, it'd be interesting to see without a United Kingdom how it functions. That's just my perspective. But go to the Irish Freedom Party. If you are in Ireland, or if you're just interested in learning about their issues and see what their policies and principles are. Aaron Joyce is working pretty hard to leave the European Union and just to restore freedom to his country. So
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to join you, Kareem. Thanks very much for the invite and for the plug of the party. It's a new party developed in 2018. I wasn't there at the start of it. As I say, I became the vice chairman this year, and we are indeed doing everything that you say, preserving free speech, the number one issue, making work pay, and slimming the state. 3 you have up there, very, very close to our chest. And I hope to join you again to speak more about the issues you're just pulling through there and what we do represent. And it's been great to meet you, gentlemen, and I'm sure we'll meet again.
Yeah,
which is thank you very much and good night in Gaelga, our language here in Ireland.
No, that's well. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I have one critique though under taxation. Just put is theft. Just 2 words.
Yeah. Well, I'd be in agreement with that. I'll bring it back to the Ard Corla, which is our national council, and I'd speak to them. And there's a lot of those. I would know their politics would be in heavy agreement with you that taxation is indeed theft.
Yes, any kind. So finally, last but not least, we have my amazing co-host, Daniel Betro, which you can find him at Daniel B. Not only does he have really, really good libertarian thought, but he's also done a lot of truther work. We talked about Bill Gates today. He's looked into Bill Gates, Tesla, different things like inflation, which if you want to know why everything costs a whole bunch, yeah, it's quantitative easing, but he breaks it down. Talks about BLM, which I mentioned, a lot of different stuff here. And finally, last but not least, if you want to keep the ideals of Murray Rothbard alive and the Ron Paul revolution going, go to the LPMisesCaucus.com. No more wars, no more lockdowns, no more bailouts, no more mandates. You can put your name here, email address, and sign up to be a delegate. We also have resources here to help people who are interested in this cause. And you can find us at the Essential Libertarians on YouTube, giving you the tools for self-governance. So, gentlemen, Vinny, Jeff, Aaron, and Daniel, I want to thank you for an amazing show. Let's keep in contact and do this again.
I was going to give a Lord of the Rings quote to finish us off. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. The shadow. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those are the stories that stayed with you. Those are the stories that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. And I think I know now that the folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something, that there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for.
I love it. I love it. And I'll end with my quote. Taxation is the price we pay for failing to build a civilized society. The higher the tax level, the greater the failure. A centrally planned totalitarian state represents a complete defeat for the civilized world, while a totally voluntary society represents its ultimate success. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in wherever you are. This is Kareem with the Essential Libertarians and Daniel Vitro, and I will see you in the next video. Special thanks to our guests, Vinny Eastwood, Jeffrey Deskovic, and Aaron Joyce. Take it easy, everyone.